Well, I guess it's time for another insightful or foolish. Let's tackle one of the more controversial cards in the game right now, Pot of Desires. The statement, "The quality and usefulness of Pot of Desires is entirely dependent on the current strategic play of a majority of players in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, both in the OCG and the TCG." When looking at Pot of Desires, one quickly and obviously understands the strengths and weaknesses. The strengths is it is a +1 with no significant inherent play restriction and an easily achievable cost requirement. The only actual play restriction is you can't activate multiples on the same turn. The weaknesses are the loss of 10 cards from the deck and the random probability that among those 10 cards are cards that one wished to draw with the effect of Pot of Desires. Now, I'm sure various individuals have attempted to manage the psychological fear associated with the loss of 10 cards from the deck by talking about various probability arguments, i.e. math, to demonstrate the generally low probabilities of losing particular card X to the cost portion of Desire. Of course, any basic math argument only dictates whether or not one should even consider running the card. Thus, it's basically meaningless outside of the most generic level of analysis, because all Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are clearly not the same and function in different ways. It is not difficult to conclude that decks that synergize over the entire deck, like Monarchs and Dragoonides, should stay the heck away from this card, whereas a deck like Blue Eyes or Cosmos can feel rather confident running it. However, those points aside, why do so many commentators and players feel this card is worth running in almost every deck, if not every deck? With the level of combo potential for most decks, especially those Tier 1 and Tier 2 decks, the competitive mindset is to establish one super combo at the onset of the duel, either the so-called unbreakable board, or a board that will produce significant advantage going forward, creating a wealth of resources, and then, regardless of the board, ride that particular combo to victory. It is this mindset that has given rise to the idea that the 10 cards banished by Pot of Desires is almost irrelevant, outside of those times when the desired combo pieces are banished, because the entire scope of the play is to hit a super combo before your opponent hits his or her super combo. Therefore, the +1 generated from Pot of Desires is thought to be essential to increasing the probability of activating that combo. To this point, running 3 copies of Pot of Desires is staple for those who choose to run Pot of Desires because it maximizes the probability of drawing it first turn, even despite the probability of drawing multiples at the start of the turn or drawing into a Pot of Desires off of a Pot of Desires. Running 1 or 2 copies almost defeats the point of running it, in a sense, based on the speed mindset that gives Desire its play advantage in the first place. This super combo strategy, though, is exactly why Pot of Desires works. When looking at the pure math and interpreting that math across most deck operations, Pot of Desires does increase the probability that a player is able to achieve a large meaningful combo early in the game versus when not running it. However, this strategy also conceals the major consequence of the cost of Pot of Desires in that, while the probability of achieving the first combo slightly increases, the probability of achieving any other meaningful combo afterwards significantly decreases. However, because few duelists even bother to play defense anymore outside of the features of their super combo or a few specific cards, the inability to achieve future combos is deemed irrelevant because it is difficult for opponents to break the first combo. For example, when looking at the number and types of traps that are played in most decks, obviously there will always be exceptions, most of those exceptions being Card of Demise builds. There are 3 criteria. First, the trap has Solemn in its name. The why is obvious. 2. The trap is a floodgate of sorts, Rivalry of Warlords, Imperial Iron Wall, Mask of Restrict, etc., etc. 3. The trap is powerful and archetype specific. Cosmojo and Cosmo, Prime Monarch and Monarchs, Fog Blade and Phantom Knights, etc. Outside of these 3 criteria, traps are typically excluded from most decks, even powerful generics like Drowning Mirror Force, Bottomless Trap Hole, Lose One Turn, etc. The reason for this dearth of traps, in my opinion, is that people do not see traps as an effective means to achieve their super combo, which is generally correct. Therefore, the general mindset of Yu-Gi-Oh! Play is the best defense is a good offense, relying on monster effects and board presence to carry a much larger portion of the defense than in years past. Basically, while not directly stated, in my opinion, the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has entered a period of play that can simply be referred to as glass cannon in a sense, and Pot of Desires is a catalyst for that type of playstyle. While some have called for banning Pot of Desires, definitely one way to eliminate it, the best way to eliminate the value of Pot of Desires may actually be re-establishing the importance of defense in the game. The loss of those 10 cards will matter a lot after a player gets hit with some form of high quality counter card. For most decks that run Pot of Desires, establishing that first combo is critical, and failure creates an environment where the probability of making a second meaningful big combination play is much smaller, thanks to the loss of resources from Pot of Desires. Overall, the end result is that as long as little defense is played, Pot of Desires will be good. If defense is ever reestablished in earnest, forcing players to make multiple play combinations to maximize winning probability, then even a supporter of Pot of Desires may need to question its value. So, am I being insightful, acknowledging that the strengths of Pot of Desire is entirely tied to the current play style of the competitive environment, or am I being foolish and maybe even disrespectful by so easily dismissing the power of a +1, regardless of the from the deck costs? Well, that concludes this Insightful or Foolish. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.